Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Joanne Groves and I'm going through my climacteric period. And I'm also a course director for Faster Health and Fitness. And this talk is going to be for any of you that prefer more of an evidence-based approach over fairy dust. So if you get frustrated seeing yet another social media post that says the 5 best exercises to fix your menopause, or the 5 best exercises to target belly fat, you can't spot fat reduce, and you really want to scream. Or the one that got me the other day was the 3 best pieces of food to balance your hormones. I mean, if it was that simple, we would have teenagers going through puberty on demand. But it isn't. There's no one size fits all. The climacteric period is multi-factorial. We are all different. We're all unique. We may have similar symptoms, but we've been through different stories, different experiences. And so we're going to experience those symptoms in a different way. And the one thing that I'm glad about is that I'm not a medical doctor. So if balancing your hormones is what you're after, I would be referring you out to an endocrinologist or a medical doctor. But today's talk will be through the lens of a performance coach. So if you are a group exercise instructor, personal trainer, or maybe you are a doctor, an endocrinologist, but you're looking for some more tools to make exercise more achievable and obtainable for your clients, this is for you. Because no one deadlift, no one squat has ever changed the planet or reduced your risk of heart disease, but consistency has. And yet not enough people are in love with it. Not enough people find it easy. And I'm sure we've all shared amazing movement experiences, but it's not that way for everyone. So I hope that by the end of this, we'll have some more tools in our kit bag to create a new PR agent for movement. So why am I talking about the climacteric period and not menopause? Well, we'll get to menopause, but the climacteric period talks about the massive fluctuation of hormones that we go through. So it's not so much about balancing them. That's not going to happen unless you're going for a medical route. But what's going to happen is we need tools to navigate and respond and react to the changes that are going on. And these changes can take place 10 years before you actually go through the menopause. So we're talking about pre-menopause, peri-menopause, menopause, and post-menopause. Menopause itself, we normally go through that about 50 or 52. It would be considered early at 45, but the normal age is around 50, 52. And that is meno, meaning month, paused. So 12 months paused of a menstruation cycle. I got mine like a birthday gift on my 50th birthday. That was the last period I had. I think some of the real challenging days and moments are for those going through the early stages of the climacteric period, because this is where you start to feel this fluctuation of hormones, but you're not really sure what's going on. At least once you've passed that menopause, you know, you have that understanding, particularly in the 5 years afterwards when you get a big drop in estrogen levels. At least you go, oh, I get it, I understand. And having that psychological reassurance is really useful. But prior to that, you're kind of in this no man's land and it's hard to know what's going on. You might go to the doctor and they might check your hormone levels and say it's absolutely normal. But then you could get those checked an hour later and it's completely different. And I can tell you now that if an 8-legged furry friend ran across the floor here, I'm going to have a hormone increase and I'm going to be running out of here. Hormones are changing all the time. So I like the climacteric period because it gives us this big umbrella of what we're actually dealing with. And it is a big chunk of our time. It's about a third of our lifespan. And it's normal to go through. What isn't normal, what would be considered a medical menopause, is if you go through it because of surgical intervention, a hysterectomy, if you're taking hormone therapy treatments, or if you've gone through a disease, that type of thing. And right now, 2025, we've got over 1 billion people going through this period of time. And that is 1 in 4. That's 1 in 8 people going through that menopause and those latter climacteric years. And yet 20% of these females will have no symptoms whatsoever. And you might be going, lucky things, because you might be one of the 80% that does experience symptoms. And that can range from mild hot flushes to really extreme, devastating symptoms. For me, the hot flushes, they feel more like a hot surge, particularly when my dog's here. Her name's Lola, and she's a little schnoodle, and she likes to sleep with us at night. And then she likes to snuggle into my back. But unfortunately, it's like someone has literally set me on fire. And I have to wave my duvet, and my poor husband gets the crux of it. But at least I know what it is because I have passed that menopause part. Now, exercise is a really good way of reducing any form of illness and making us more healthy and improving longevity. Yet, only 1 in 5 females between 45 and 64 are getting the basic recommendation of movement just purely for health reasons. And that's according to the World Health Organization. Only 40% of the population in America meet the basic minimum for health. And that figure drops through the climacteric period to 7% in women. Now, there's many different reasons for this. There are some thoughts that it's due to the fact that many women still don't, as young girls, get the same opportunity and experiences with sport. So they're more likely to drop out of sports as they age and after having children themselves. And also because many women are still the main carers for their parents and elderly relatives. So that could be a combination in it too. But it's kind of up in the air. But what we do know is you can't guarantee what symptoms you're going to get. And you can't guarantee how psychologically those symptoms are going to affect us. So we're certainly not in the same boat by any means. But what I thought might be quite nice now is if you could, and you're near your computer, just drop in the chat box what symptoms you may have gone through, maybe a partner or maybe a loved one or maybe a client of yours that has experienced. And my hope is we'll see a few that keep coming up, but we might see some others and we'll go, oh, I didn't know that was one of those symptoms, because I am definitely going to miss some of those symptoms because there are literally so many of them. And while we're at that, if you've got any questions on any of the content that we cover, drop that in the chat box as well. And I will make sure that we get to that at the end. But the one thing that we can do is make sure that we are robust as possible for whatever storm is coming, to make sure that we have the best boat, if you like, to weather whatever condition is going to be out there. And the way you do that is, number one, don't smoke. Okay, if we can cut out smoking, it will still have a great effect. But yes, that's number one. Number two is to make sure that we're moving more. And number three is make sure that we have a healthy diet with more plant-based food and higher fiber. If we can do those three things, we know that we can reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease. We can improve longevity. We can reduce the risks of bone density loss and muscle mass loss. So do all of those things. Yes, right, let's get on. So we know that our hormones are all over the place, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the four main hormones that we have to navigate is a drop of estrogen, the drop of testosterone, progesterone, and a rise of cortisol, which is normally combined with a lack of sleep, which helps us to experience things like anxiety, brain fog, all of those things. But we want to know how we can get over these and what we can do. So the first one I want to look at is our vasomotor symptoms. So we touched on this before. This is the hot flush. It's really like having a bit of a dodgy thermostat. Your central nervous system gets super excited, thinks you're cold, and it wants to dilate all your blood vessels. And you feel like you've been set on fire. That's physically what's happening. For some, psychologically, it can be really impactful if you suddenly start to soak your clothes when you're in the office, or if you're not sleeping because of these hot flushes, or maybe you're waking up, you've had a hot flush, and then you're freezing cold afterwards. And one of the things that I found really interesting, there was a study on women where they were measuring the blood vessel dilation. And women were also writing down when they were experiencing these hot flushes. And what they actually discovered is you didn't always experience the symptoms, although the blood vessels were dilating. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know what it means. My hope is that maybe in the future we'll have more research and some more tools to be able to help change that experience. What we can do right now with a movement perspective is think about the temperature in our health clubs, whether there's ventilation, aircon, windows, that type of thing. Maybe it's helping give advice on different types of clothing. I find if I'm wearing an open back, that's really useful. Or you might want to take your gym class outside into a park, that type of thing. The other thing that's really useful is build a community of like-minded people that can talk and chat and laugh. Any ways that we can get hold of those androgynous opioids, cold water therapy, it's not for me, but you can still get those endogenous opioids, that pain relief, that feel good factor from movement and laughing. So building a community where you do that is a great idea. The other things that we might experience are increased pain around our joints, reactive arthritis. That's a special one just for the climacteric period. And if you're having a flare up, then you shouldn't be doing resistance training or any plyometric training at that time. But when you're not mid flare up, that's a great opportunity to build in some resistance training around those joints. There's an increased diagnosis of things like, I have to say this right, adhesive capsulitis. So chronic pain around the shoulder, often called frozen shoulder. Plantar fasciitis, that type of stuff. Fibromyalgia, and do actually have another talk particularly on fibromyalgia and how we can change the experience through gameplay. But while we're talking about pain, I think it's really important that we all get on the same page when it comes to current research around pain science. And this is taken from the British Pain Society. Thank you, Faster, for putting me in touch with this. And it's a really useful tool for your clients. Pain can be perceived as a warning of potential damage, but can also be present when there is no actual harm being done to the body. I just wanted to use my British accent there. Hope you enjoyed that. That's really important and it's really powerful. You can have pain when there's damage, but you can have pain when there is no damage present whatsoever. And there was a great research study where up until that point, people who had back pain would go to the doctor, they'd have back pain, they'd get an MRI, and then if the MRI said, oh, yes, you've got a slip disc, they go, so I've got pain. So therefore, the slip disc caused the pain. That's what you'd think. But when they actually did this massive study with hundreds of people, those that were experiencing pain and those that had no pain whatsoever, what they discovered was that some people who had a slip disc or a herniated disc had pain, but some people who had herniated disc, slip disc, had no pain whatsoever. And in fact, some people had an even worse state in their spine and no pain at all. So pain is a correlation, not a causation. And although this can be really hard to get our head round, particularly from a client's perspective, it's actually a good thing because it means that we can help change the experience of pain. But before we go near that, if anybody is experiencing any form of unexplained pain, we need to refer out to a medical doctor. We do not guess. They need to check that there isn't anything else going on, like a disease. And this is very close to my heart because I had a friend who was experiencing pain. She didn't go and get diagnosed until later on. And it turned out it was stage 4 cervical cancer. So we really mustn't take any guesses with that at all. Apologies, I just needed to go and sort the dog out there. The other thing about pain is there are 2 types of pain. We've got acute pain, and we're not talking like little pussycat pain. We're talking about the type of pain when you stub your toe or you step on a nail, that type of pain. And then there's the type of pain that persists for longer than 12 weeks, and that's what we call chronic pain. And once you've got a diagnosis of either, we can go to the research and have a look at what we should be doing. With chronic pain, Interestingly, many times if someone is diagnosed with chronic pain, the actual level of intensity in that pain will drop, which is a good thing. Now, the other symptoms or the things that will happen is as our estrogen levels drop, particularly in the latter years of the climacteric period, so after the actual last period, we can have an increased drop in bone mineral density. But it is worth noticing that bone mineral density is at its peak at 30, and that's what it gets measured next to. And so if you get a drop that is measured on a DEXA scan of minus 2.5, that's when it's considered osteoporosis. But there are things that we can do to combat that, and that is stimulate bone growth. So actually stimulate force through the bone, encouraging those osteoblasts to build up. And this is interesting too. When we get to 60, the bone mineral density loss increases twofold, but our risk of falling increases 13-fold. So actually looking at why we fall is really, really interesting. And 95% of bones don't break without fall. Fragile bones rarely break without a fall. And I think that's really impactful. So we need to look at how do we reduce the risks of falling. 40% of falls happen through balance related issues. It can also be a combination of a loss of muscle mass. If we're sedentary and we're not using our motor learning skills, if we're only moving in a linear manner or with minimal movement patterns, we're not challenging all those wonderful different directions we can go in and all the muscles that are required to take us in different directions. So functional training becomes a really important part. Cardiovascular training becomes a really important part. Strength training becomes a really important part. But making sure that we have the skills to react to our body weight, our center of gravity shifting is huge. And the other thing that happens is if we do experience a fall, it's highly likely that we might become worried about falling again. And by doing that, we start to over focus and we start to really concentrate. And there's some really interesting research from Dr. Tim Masters, who looks at what happens in an old elderly generation after they've had a fall. And he calls it a reinvestor, where they're really thinking hard about their skills. And in doing so, they start to actually make more errors. And this is relevant to the way we coach, because if we're coaching intrinsically with knees in line with toes, shoulders pulled back, or squeeze your glutes, or think about the step, we are encouraging them to use a different part in the brain. And as we age, that is a harder part to keep challenging, and we can increase the risks of falls. It also means that it's harder to learn. Whereas if we make it more about task-based or play, so maybe it's, I want you to step your leg over this line and reach your right hand to touch the cone, but you don't give any more coaching cues than that. The client then has to self-organize their body. There's no rules of right and wrong. There's just a feedback. Did they get the foot over their line and were they able to touch the cone? And they get to change that movement if it wasn't successful. So they know what success looks like, but they get the opportunity to self-organize their body. And the difference here is huge. People are much less likely to fall. And the other part is the area of the brain responsible for cognition through task-based play continues to be able to learn even as we get older. Whereas that ability to take on those intrinsic coaching cues becomes far more challenging, particularly with things like dementia, brain fog. Then we come to weight loss. And wow, this is a massive, massive topic. And I've just got to be really careful because we could be talking about this for another hour. It is one of the biggest psychological impacts for many, many women. Growing up, before we're teenagers, we've been subjected to an obscene amount of toxic images on social media and demands on what our body should look like as a teenager, going through pregnancy, postnatal. And then we go into this climacteric period with one body and we seem to come out a completely different shape. And that can be really, really tough. Part of it, if we are not moving a sedentary lifestyle, then we're not going to have as much muscle mass. And if we lose muscle mass, we're going to increase our body fat. And our body fat starts to shift. So where you might have been carrying it on your bottom, it starts to shift around your stomach area. But it's not the stuff that you can actually pinch that we probably moan about more, the subcutaneous fat, that is a problem. It's actually the visceral fat. And this starts to move around the organs. And that's what can be dangerous, because it's metabolically active. It increases the amount of inflammation that we have. It increases the amount of LDL cholesterol that we have, so those lower density lipids. And with that, with the drop of estrogen and the drop of testosterone, we've got less muscle mass, more of the bad cholesterol, less of the good cholesterol, more triglycerides that are taking fat around the body. We become insulin resistant, and it can increase our risk of type 2 diabetes. So there's a lot going on. One study I read in 1988, they compared diets to those in 2006, and comparing calorific intake from 1988 to 2006. 2006, people were heavier with more body fat, less muscle mass. Now, there's a whole hypothesis of many reasons, but one of the things that was consistently thought of was the increase of sedentary lifestyles. So not only do we want to encourage our clients to move with us 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, but also move more within the day. If where they normally sit down, can they stand up? If they're still working, can they take phone calls, walking and talking? Get a dog, get out and keep moving. So try and increase that activity levels between those sessions is a really important thing. At the moment, we still measure weight through a BMI. And while that is really useful at saving lives across countries, it's not great on an individual level, particularly if you're short. You just don't fit into the norm. And I had a client, Sarah, who had worked really, really hard to get over a toxic self-image and a history of eating disorders. And she was doing so well. She discovered her strong. And then she went for a health check with Bupa here in the UK. And without really taking any time to listen and get to know her, they just measured her weight on the BMI. And she came in at just on the edge, 25, and 25 to 29.9 would be considered overweight. And to her, that was catastrophic. And it sent her on this absolute massive spiral. So we need to be really, really careful the way we address this issue. If it's a BMI above 30, that would be considered obesity. Perhaps a better way of actually measuring would be a waist circumference, because as I said, it's actually about measuring the amount of visceral fat we have inside. But if we can move more, if we can get more muscle mass, then we can actually reduce the amount of visceral fat. And even if we reduce that a little bit, we're going to reduce the risk of getting cardiovascular diseases. And that's really important. I've probably missed something there, so remind me at the end. The last one I wanted to cover here, again, this is a drop of estrogen, and this will impact collagen around that pelvic floor. So we might see an increase of stress incontinence or surge incontinence, and also UTI infections. Now, with stress incontinence or surge incontinence, still the first point of call seems to be pelvic floor exercises. Pelvic floor exercises combined with movement, very good. I always think of a pinball machine. So flicking that pinball machine up and then having a little hold. And you always know if someone's doing it because you start to see their eyebrows going at the same time. Or it could just be holding in a toxic fart, that type of thing. Hopefully it's not too toxic. Now, my mum started to get urinary tract infections, and she was getting increased pelvic dysfunction and urinary surge incontinence. And One of the things that flagged up when I was doing research for this is, again, in those latter years of the climacteric period, we might think it's all over, but we have still got that drop of estrogen levels. And she did take HRT, but that was back when we thought it was incredibly dangerous, so she came off it. And she hasn't been on it since, and she's been absolutely fine. But when they got to the bottom of the UTI, it was salmonella infection, but she was still experiencing the incontinence issue, and it was really starting to affect her actual self-confidence, and she wasn't going out as much, and she was definitely far less active. And one of the things this flagged up was this could be because of estrogen. So I'd said, go back to the doctor. And she's just got an estrogen pump, and that's been brilliant for her. But obviously, we don't diagnose. But if you are aware of some of these things, you can send somebody out. So as far as the movement goes, what I use is the faster process. And I keep saying this. First thing is, am I the right person? Because sometimes if someone is exhausted and they're really depressed, they might need to go and speak to someone about their mental health before they do any form of movement. So refer out. Then we get to research. So if they come back with a diagnosis, we get to work with those medical professions, and we get to use a process that I teach on motor skill to work out the best way of helping them, finding out any contraindicated exercises with any of the conditions they may have. But then the fun part is, how do we get them moving? We want to know, first of all, what is their reason for moving? What do they want to get better at? What does strong feel like to them? It doesn't matter what I think strong is. What does it feel like to my client? And then I need to know how skillful they are, their ability to be able to coordinate their muscles at the right time with the right amount of power output. So say, for example, they wanted to do a squat or a vertical displacement. So that's a squat, a lunge, a jump, anything that requires you to fold. So we see the biomechanics of that. We will see that pelvis fold, that knee flexion, the foot go into dorsiflexion, eversion, and abduction. So we'll use those eyes to see the biomechanics. And then if we want to get them better at that, we might want them to do squats and lunges in different areas and different places. So that's the biomechanics and their skill. And then we want to think about, right, well, we want to make sure that we're getting an adaptation. We want more muscle mass. So we need to work them in performance, and that requires that adaptation of their muscles. So we need to be able to do the thing for long enough, fast enough, intense enough. So we're thinking about the energy that's required to do it. So which system we're going to be using. But first of all, check your PRQ, your medical records, refer out. Most of the symptoms within menopause might be flagged up anyway within your PAR-Q, as they would with any client. Any questions on that, you can ask me afterwards, but most of those things will be flagged up. When it comes to exercise, load and intensity, nothing has changed when it comes to the World Health Organization. So 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate exercise where we can still breathe, or 75 to 150 minutes of intense exercise where we're struggling to breathe. Also, 2 or 3 times a week strength training where we're fatiguing every muscle in our whole body. And this can be done with weight training, with body weight, that type of thing. When we get to 65, they've also added in, which is great, the addition of bringing functional training opportunities to develop your motor learning skills, working on your balance, bringing in movements to enable you to respond to any shifts in center of gravity, that type of thing. But what I do want to add to this is it's not become this false dichotomy that you shouldn't be doing cardiovascular exercise and you should just be doing strength training. That's not happened. Yet we are seeing on social media constantly do strength training. And I think that's great if it encourages people to do more strength training. But what I don't want to do is see people missing out on the cardiovascular training that is really good for reducing these triglycerides and for really helping making sure that we have more of the good cholesterol and less of the bad cholesterol. There's still really important factors to cardiovascular training, cognition, and we're able to use those muscles and develop the skills, reducing our risk of cardiovascular disease. So it's all good. It's kind of like exercise is this one size fits all. No, it isn't. It's not the magic bullet, but it's pretty close, particularly if we can make it meet the person in front of us. So even without weight loss or hormonal therapy, movement improves sleep, yay, cognition, metabolic health, and libido. As long as we can find the way of connecting movement with our clients, because we may have had this amazing experience with exercise, but not all of our clients have. I've got a lot of my clients that have been through really tough times, particularly when they were at school and they were expected to do fitness tests. A lot of them felt embarrassed or incompetent, forced to do things like the stretch and reach test. And then if they didn't make the grade, they were sat and made to watch those people that did get celebrated for it. And that's not a great feeling. So for some people, we really want to take away this anxiety and build them up. So what are the best exercises? You got it. There aren't any. There are no best exercises. There's no one deadlift, no squat. All there is consistency. So if your movement program brings that person back, it was the right exercise. And let's keep going with that, creating the experience that makes someone want to move. This is my client, Rachel, and she struggled when she went through the climacteric period. She said that she just didn't recognize the body that she was in. Her shoulder was sore. She felt like there was weight gain, and she really wasn't happy at all. And I chatted to her and I was like, what is it that you really want to do? And she's like, I want to get back out on my motorbike. I'm like, okay. So we worked on movements that she was capable of doing, rebuilding her confidence and gradually introducing new skills to get her back on that motorbike. We can work in different ways. We can introduce weight training. And if our client is new to weight training and their skill level is low, a great place to start is with machine-based work. It's much simpler for a client that hasn't lifted before to start there. I love a leg press machine. I have to say, I don't normally give a shout out to products, but Techno Gym, your leg press machine is insane. It is so comfortable. The only problem with our machine-based work is it doesn't give the opportunities to develop our motor skills in all those different ways, which would be great for reducing the risks of falling. So adding in functional training movements, opportunities to stop and turn, practicing those deceleration skills, just so that you can be a diva, when you go to Target or you want to show up your grandchildren when you're out in the park, something like that. And importantly, it's got to make you smile. It's got to hit you here. You've got to want to do it. And as a trainer, what we're thinking of biomechanically, once we know what our client wants to do, what are the exercises that are going to have the right carryover to make them better at that thing? If my client wants to get good at doing an overhead squat, the movements have got to look like an overhead squat. It'd be no good if I start giving them a golf swing. But if they want to get good at a golf swing, it needs to look like a squat with a rotation. So we need to match the biomechanics, that bone sequencing, what we can see. We need to make sure the muscles are contracting in the right sequence with the right power output. So this is all going into the back of our mind when we're thinking about that exercise selection, creating that experience that's going to get our clients excited. We need to think about matching the feelings. Now, in one way, I used to think this was about, some people like to do things with the creatine phosphate where they can lift heavy, but it doesn't feel necessarily that hard at the time until a few days later. Or some people like that intense feeling. And many people in the fitness industry love that lactate system to really make them feel like they're working hard. And then other people think there's nothing worse and they'd like to be able to chat with their workout all the time. But that's not quite what I mean. What I actually mean is knowing how to hit those energy systems, but how that emotionally connects with your client. So if you have a client that remembers feeling amazing when they were part of a team and they were working hard together, that might be a reason to hit the anaerobic system and get carryover in the exercise, but also to connect with the client on how it feels. If they were someone that enjoyed feeling in control and being able to garden for hours and hours and hours, then it may be, that's the feeling I want to go for, and match that with our aerobic movements. But we also need to manage how the client not only feels within the session through those energy systems and the exercises and the pieces of equipment that we choose, or where we actually train in the gym. We also need to think about, how do they feel 2 days later? Now, some people, they love it when they get up and go, I can't walk down the stairs. My bum's on fire. Yes. And that's when you're thinking, right, so this particular client needs to move every muscle around their hip, preferably one side of their hip at a time. And they want to get hold of every single muscle that's responsible for hip extension, abduction, external rotation. And you then want to load it eccentrically in as many ways as possible in the absolute opposite of that. So hip flexion, adduction, internal rotation, in as many ways as possible, because they're going to wake up and they're going to go, ah! And I love doing that, particularly when a client has said, my physio said that my glutes don't work. And then they literally text me and go, oh my goodness, what have you done to my butt? It is on fire. My glute is obviously fine. But if that person gets up and they've had a previous injury, they've experienced sciatica, or maybe they've had fibromyalgia, and they get up and they feel DOMS, but their brain and the story that it connects to reminds them of a time that they were injured, that they were anxious about moving. That could be catastrophic. That's not what we want to experience. So we need to know that we've got a good knowledge of biomechanics, because then we want to be doing movements that don't take them eccentrically into ranges that they're not used to. It doesn't load them in flexion, adduction, internal rotation. It does the exact opposite. And we're in control of how our clients feel within that session. And if we're not sure about how we do that, then you can obviously message me afterwards. Now, my next client, Cora, she wanted weight loss. She said that was her goal. But I'm not having that, because weight loss needs to have your diet on point. But let's assume that the diet is on point. She wanted weight loss. This is kind of the thing that's in the way of her movement goal. And I need to get to that movement goal, because that is where we get to create our magic. So we're talking to her. She was like, I want to be able to get to the bus without feeling self-conscious. I want to be able to run to the bus. I want to be able to walk to the bus without feeling self-conscious. And this is really important, because what I may have done in the past would think, she wants weight loss, and I'm going to use big generic compound movements. And if I'd done that, the first time I trained with her, she actually found squatting really challenging. To us, the skill of vertical displacement squat seems really easy, but for someone who's sedentary, it can be really challenging. And if I'd have continued with that, squatting would make her specifically good at squatting. So it's not generic, it is specific. But not only that, the first 4 weeks of her program, while she's learning the skills of squatting, her body will be taking away part of her energy. It will be storing it just in case she needs it. Because when we do something that's new, that's out of our wheelhouse of our motor skills, the body wants to protect us. So it holds back. And that's the exact opposite of what we want with a client who's on a weight loss journey. We want them to give us every bit of energy that they've got. So I need to do something that she's already skillful at, because I need to put that skill under performance so I can get an adaptation as quick as possible. For that, I need every bit of energy to get that adaptation. So she walked in, so I knew she was able to walk, and that's where we started. So I gave her some dumbbells to start to load that walk so she could make it harder, but I'm starting where she was at. I mean, she does need to improve her skills when it comes to Connect 4. She plays with a lot of children, but we're working on it. She also said that the areas that she felt like she would like to see a change in or feel a change in was around her middle area. Now, we know that we can't spot fat reduce, but what I can do is give her the feeling that when she wakes up, she goes, oh, I feel that area. So I'm using the core momentum trainers that have got the lubricated lead pellets, shot pellets in, to use those to challenge all of those muscles around the spine, the shoulders, and the hips. She also found squatting was quite sore on her knees, and that is not because of her weight. It's actually more to do with inflammation. This is Angela, and Angela came to me with a sore shoulder, diagnosed as a frozen shoulder, so adhesive capsulitis, and we did lots of work on allowing her to feel more confident. So it started off with not using the shoulder at all. And then what we started to do was to do movements where she would just lunge her legs backwards. We then started to use the opposite arm. So it was her right shoulder. So rather than taking her right arm back, we took her left arm over her right shoulder, which was still getting this opposite shoulder to move. We started with some weight-bearing exercises, but I knew I needed to get to the bottom of what it was she really wanted to do. And it turned out that after her husband had died, she really wanted to go back to tennis, but didn't feel confident. She was also experiencing dry eyes. So that had been flashed up on the symptoms of climacteric period. So I suggested she go and see a doctor. They've given her some medication for that because when estrogen levels drop, it can dry out your eyes. And we've built up on movements that have made her feel strong. It turns out doing press-ups makes her feel strong. So that's some of the things that have gone into her program. Lifting things like vipers and dumbbells and kettlebells make her feel strong. She started to bring her tennis racket. She's now back to playing tennis. But the thing that really made her so proud of herself was when she achieved her first Tough Mudder. And this bit to me was just a prime example of what an amazing job we have. She was so determined to get up this half pipe. She failed and dropped down 3 times, and then she ran up, and this guy's grabbing her by her arm. And I'm literally going, no, not the arm, not the arm. But I didn't say a word because I knew that my story could maybe influence whether she felt it was an opportunity or danger. And she succeeded, and it was so good. And I just think that we are so gifted with the work that we do. I wish more people would realize that we don't need to sell fancy supplements or do biohacking. We've got this amazing gift, and that is to create experiences people want to come back for. And it gets me a bit emotional. This is Claire, and Claire has been through this climacteric journey twice. She went through it surgically when she had breast cancer at 23. But what was really interesting in talking to Claire, she shared her story with me. First time round, she said it was really physical. There were the aches, there were the pains. But the second time round, she said it was far more psychological. She suffered with depression, anxiety. It increased her symptoms of ADHD. And she said she would never realize that it could be so very different. And that's why I say there isn't a one size fits all. There's so many different mechanisms. There's so many different things that are at play. But if we can help our clients just a little bit in navigating these changes, then it's great. Now, Karen had pain in her ankles. And she found that really frustrating when she was skiing. She also had reactive arthritis in her wrist. And so what we tried to do is get her used to wearing these ski boots before she actually went skiing, which was brilliant because she had to bring her ski boots while it was still quite sunny and no snow in the park near me. And what we were doing was getting her to move on different terrains. So there's a little sandbag under her foot there, but we built that up so she was doing the whole sessions in those ski boots. And she's also got some little handles here so that we're getting used to the grip. Here might be quite useful to add something like a squat, but I'm also thinking that when we're skiing, it's not just a squat. We're actually we're being pulled by gravity, so you might want a band in front. Also, you've got to actually respond to your shift in gravity. So I started to use the weighted bag and throw that at her at the same time, so she had to respond. The other things that we used, the Viper, putting that on the shoulder, walking around in her ski boots, because you have to put your skis on and navigate around. So I love that when we can get creative with our clients. This is Damaris, and unfortunately she did have a fall, so she appears in Reducing the Risk of Falling video. She broke her patella, so she loves anything that feels as though she's working on her balance. She's done really well at now navigating over hurdles. And I wanted to make sure that she could do a lot of dual tasks. So walk as well as talking, or handle the weighted bag being thrown at her. She still lifts her Viper in lots of different directions. That's partly because she's just had a grandson, and it's great. This has just given her that new excitement, and so she's lifting in lots of different ways. But for her deadlifts don't need to look like a traditional deadlift, and that would be great if they needed to, and they would if she needed to, but she needs to be able to be an active grandma. So she needs to be able to lift, rotate, pick up, bend. So those are the types of things that we're adding on to this type of play. And I wanted to give you something in this talk that added on to potentially what you already do with strength training. So that's why I've kind of chosen movements that may not be the ones that we see every day. This is Hina, and Hina stars in another video around fibromyalgia, so I hope you can join me for that particular talk. For her, there was a big emotional upheaval when she went through the 12 months without a period, because it was goodbye to her opportunity of having children. And that has been a real grieving process for her. She was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And when I first went to train her, she couldn't even stand for more than a few minutes. And I could just see how much she was carrying and how anxious she was about moving. And it's been incredible to see her journey. I don't know if you can see, but the picture in the corner there, she's actually got her little Hoover in her hand, and that was an online session, and she starts hoovering away. So I was like, right, we can use that. You can be Lara Croft. We are running out of time, but I'm going to quickly whiz through. This is Katrine, and she came with some chronic pain in her hamstring, and she was really worried and anxious that she'd never be able to run again, because it's one of her ways of managing if she'd had lack of sleep, managing her anxiety. And she is. So that's brilliant news. Started off just going for short little runs, reintroducing movements she was successful in. And then she also wanted to try a little bit of weightlifting, which was great because she'd never done that before. She was always a cardio bunny, but being able to bring weights into her program's been fantastic. And she was so chuffed. Ultimately, our clients are going to choose their sessions and judge their sessions on the way you make them feel. So make sure you give them a show. Make sure you tap into what they like, what they enjoy. This is Sarah, and she struggled a lot with depression and anxiety. And also she's on quite a lot of medication, which means that she's not so confident with her feet. And here you can see she's running around to different targets, and I'm using the games to make sure that she's self-organizing. She's finding what is strong to her, what is powerful to her, but I don't have to keep barking intrinsic coaching cues at her and micromanaging her movement. But there isn't one best exercise. There's no simple answer. There's just talking to your client and finding out what makes them tick. Karen was diagnosed with osteoporosis. She went through an early menopause. She thought she would never run again. She wanted to be able to do the monkey bars, and she wanted to be able to do back bends. I went to the research, looked at what we could do. She's now not only doing her monkey bars, she's done a 10K run, and she is teaching this process to all her clients. She has her own Pilates training center. At the bottom line, all of these things mean that you have to really listen to your client. You need to get really good at knowing what they like. So I thought Lola's ear might be quite cute. She's still asleep. You might hear her barking in a minute. But really listen, not just to the words that are saying, but if there's a little smile in the corner of their mouth, or the rhythm in which they're talking starts to change, their breath starts to change. Some people will come in if they want something and move away if they don't. Make sure that you listen to those subtle cues, picking up the right piece of kit for that client at the right time, the right exercise at the right time, and building that opportunity to make sure they want to come back. There's no one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter approach. The best exercise is the one that makes that person want to come back and do more. And if we can really find out what compels our clients to move, make them excited, we can create a better experience. And package that by building a community that can help address both the physical and the psychological impact of the climacteric period. You're going to build up those women to be the best version of themselves to handle whatever's coming their way. Thank you so much. And if you've got any questions, let me know now. And if you would like the research that has gone into delivering this talk, please just email me there. Thank you.